This is the My Writing Diary podcast. I'm Bill Wong. Today's podcast is about the Arab perspective. As I mentioned before, I'm writing a book on the Middle East, and part of that process is to research and understand the Middle East. A week or two ago, I didn't even know where Libya was, or the Suez Canal, or the Red Sea. I needed to learn a lot at a library, and I noticed this book called The World Through Arab Eyes by Telhami. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I had learned because as a writer, I need to be open-minded. I need to understand things I didn't understand before. Coming from the West, I have a jaded, biased opinion because I receive Western news. I went to a book of which one of my friends who's Arab said that I've heard of him and he's good. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that I learned. The top one is the 3 Ds, which is dignity, distrust of U.S. democracy. That the history of the Arab world is they want dignity, and they're very distrusting of the U.S. democracy and its intentions. All the factors that go into these all other storylines when I write are going to be trying to balance the two perspectives, the Western perspective, the Middle East perspective, the Israeli perspective, and the Arab perspective. So I'm just going to go through some of my notes when I read this book. First of all, there's something called kaharma, which is dignity and the ending of persuasive sense of humiliation. And that's what a lot of the Arabs are feeling. And the Arabs see themselves as being repressed, not only by the rulers in the Arab world, but also subcontractors / the West. I didn't know that some of these relationships, this is an audio diary for myself, so I understand and I can write better. I did not realize Qatar was considered a very prime U.S. ally. They actually reached out to Israel prior to both of the wars. Egypt is 1/4 of Arab population. In 1948, Palestine was lost. In 1967, East Jerusalem was lost from the Arabs. I did not know that in 1967, Egypt lost the Sinai Peninsula and most of Gaza. And that in the 73 war, the Yom Kippur War, Saudi Arabia financed the Jordanians and the Syrians, even though they stayed on the side. The oil embargo was a way for Saudi Arabia to hurt Israel because that would hurt the United States, which was supporting Israel, and I did not know that. And in 1993, there was an Oslo Accord between Israel and the PLO. However, many of the Palestinians turned to Hamas in the early 2000s, around 2006, due to some legislative elections, because they didn't feel that the PLO was doing their job to help protect the rights of the Arabs. I did not know this, that most Arabs are Muslims, and that they look at Turkey as a model for democracy. Some of the ideas that we have in the West about gender equality aren't true in the Middle East. Something happened in the Tahrir Square where women were forced to have these virginity tests, and they were subject to these drug use tests and these promiscuity tests, and that women do not have access to education and access to jobs in the West. Equality means many different things in the Middle East. And I did not know that in the 1800s, Egypt had an opportunity to become the dominant player in the region, but the West intervened. In 1956, Egypt, France, and Israel attacked Egypt for the Suez Canal. And I made this comment, if you are not our friend, you are our enemy. And France supplied weapons to Israel up through 1967. But in 1967, France stopped supplying weapons to Israel, and that's when the United States became the big player and the supporter for Israel. In 1973, the United States, because they were supplying a majority of the weapons, military, and monetary support to Israel, they had a lot of influence on Israel. I do not understand why that isn't the case today. I learned a lot about the perspective from the Arabs, and that will help me write my book. See you on the pages.